Welcome back to Bookhaven. Today I'll be doing 25 bookish facts about me. Fact number 1. So if I'm in love with a book and I'm really enjoying it, obsessed, love, gonna be one of my favorite books, I take forever to read it. When I know I am completely engrossed in the characters and the story and world, I don't want it to end. So I can take up to a month to read a book I consider 5 out of 5 stars amazing. And even one of my favorite books of the year that I started 6 to 8 months ago, I still haven't finished because I don't want it to come to an end. Fact number 2, my favorite place to read has got to be curled up in bed with my dog Lucky snuggled up beside me. Fact number 3, my favorite genres. Of course, fantasy, as I've mentioned on my channel before, and probably travel nonfiction. Bookish fact number 4. I'd say one of my favorite things and one of the things I get made fun of the most at home for is reading children's books in character, whether it be to my son or my nieces. This is bookish fact number 5. One of my favorite memories and one of the few times where I've met an author was in Berlin, Germany, when I met Patrick Rothfuss, who is, of course, the author of The Name of the Wind. So when I lived in Berlin, my son was very young and he was still breastfeeding. So I was quite nervous to leave him for any amount of time, but I really wanted to meet Patrick Rothfuss, and he was giving a talk. I went with a couple friends and listened to him speak. The auditorium was completely packed at the university, and of course he was amazing. And afterwards he stayed to sign books, and the line was so long, and I knew I had to get home to breastfeed my son. So my friend stayed and I ran home, came back after I saw my son, and there were probably 30 more people left in line. Anyways, I talked to, I don't know if it was his agent, but it was someone who was there with him on tour. And she heard my story and had told me that I had missed the part where he offered for any parents with young children at home got to come first in line to get their books signed so they could go home to their children. Well, I had missed that, and I'd come back and I was worried that it'd be too late and I wouldn't get my book signed, but she told him I was there and what my story was, and he had her bring me up to the very front of the line to meet him and cut in front of the last 30 people waiting. So I felt awful for this, but when I met him, he was the most charming, hilarious man I think I've ever met, and we started talking about children and somehow ended up talking about breastfeeding, and he was giving me breastfeeding advice. And the men behind me, there was like 10 guys behind me, were beet red and so embarrassed and completely awkward at the topic of conversation they could hear, and I thought it was hilarious. This is bookish fact number 6. So I hate romance novels with passion. I don't think I've ever completed one. I tried maybe at some point in my life, but funny enough, I always crave a good romance in every story I read. Bookish fact number 7. So my son is named after one of my favorite characters in a book that I've fallen in love with. That book is Every Living Thing by James Herriot, and my son's name is Tristan, so if you've read the book, maybe you know a little bit about that character. Bookish fact number 8. Don't hate me for this. I know this drives a lot of readers crazy, but I am still struggling to not dog ear my books. Not the one, I have so many bookmarks, but every once in a while when my son jumps on me or my dog is about to poo, I'll dog ear and run away and try not to lose my page. This is bookish fact number 9. I do unhaul books that I am not in love with for multiple reasons. 1, because my husband makes me, and 2, because I know other people might enjoy that book more. But I am very emotionally attached to my favorite books. I used to have them up by my bed, and more recently I put together these bookshelves in the basement and brought down all my books, including my favorites, and I've had a very hard time acknowledging that I'm a floor away from some of my favorites. This is bookish fact number 10. Okay, so in terms of bookish life goals, I really want to have the use of my very own room to just fill the walls with books, my very own library someday. Bookish fact number 11. Sometimes when I'm really invested in a character and into the story and an embarrassing moment or situation occurs to my favorite character, I have to put the book on hold or close it and step away because I'm blushing like crazy and I feel so bad for them. Bookish fact number 12. Also in Berlin, I was able to meet another one of my favorite authors, Peter V. Brett. He did the Warden Man series, and I met him in a tiny little bar in Berlin. There was probably only maybe 50 people max, so I was floored. I was so excited to be so up close and personal with him. I was there with a friend, and he was making jokes about being American, and that most of the people in the room were German, with a few Americans, a few expats. But I happened to be the only Canadian in the room, and of course he left on a joke about Canadians versus Americans, so I gave him a really hard time when I went up to get my book signed. And actually, when we moved back to Canada from Germany, I thought I had lost my signed book, so I was freaking out. And my husband ended up writing into him on Twitter and explaining the situation and asking if he could send something, like a book plate signed. And he was so lovely. And they both ended up surprising me, not only with a signed book plate, but a token from one of his stories, one of his books. Hold on, I'll show it to you. So not only did Peter V. Brett send a signed book plate, but he was also so kind to send along this worded clat from the Demon Cycle. Can't thank him enough still, but I think it's because he felt guilty because of the Canadian joke. Bookish fact number 14. Not everyone know, but I am in love and secretly addicted to children's books. I don't just mean middle grade, I mean children's books. I started a collection probably in my early 20s, even before I had the thought of having children in my head, but later would tell everyone that that's why I had such a collection of children's stories, was because I was collecting my favorites for my son. Bookish fact number 15. My favorite book of all time that I'll say to anyone is Shantram by Gregory David Roberts. Number 16. This is the first year in my life that I've ever DNF'd, did not finish, a book or multiple books. Before this year, I had felt that it was disrespectful in a sense to not push through and finish a book. This year is the year where that has happened for the first time because my to be read list is too high at this point to do that. Fact number 17, if there was a fictional world from one of my books that I could choose to live in, it would be in Nevermore from The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Tansen. This is bookish fact number 18. I don't snack while I read. I usually just have a cup of tea or hot water by me. But if I am reading a story and the characters are eating donuts, or particularly with the high fantasies when they have bread with butter and honey on it to take on their long journeys, I definitely crave those things and will often get up and make them. Bookish fact number 19. I have never reread a book. Maybe I can think of one or two books that I've reread in my entire lifetime, but even favorite series like Harry Potter, never reread. That's just not something I do, even with my most beloved books. Bookish fact number 20. I've never attended a literary event or a bookish event, so I'm really hoping 2019, I hear there's a couple good ones in New York City, which I'm not too far away from. So if any of you have recommendations, let me know. But fingers crossed that I get to go to the one in spring 2019. Fact number 21. I did become really interested in everything steampunk after reading one of my favorite series, the Agatha H. Clockwork Princess, and did go to a steampunk event, completely dolled up and dressed up in steampunk character, and met two indie authors who I do have on my TBR for the rest of the year. Fact number 22. I do have a couple tattoos, and one of them I would call bookish. Have you spotted it in the videos yet? Fact number 23, I did have some poetry published when I was younger in a short collection of poetry from around the world, but I haven't ever written anything more than that that's made it into publication. I have been trying to write a book for the last 2 years, and hopefully in the new year that will get going again. Bookish fact 24. I'm well known for pimping my favorite books out to my friends and family. If I really fall in love with a book, I want everyone to read it. So pretty much everyone in my family that I know will try reading has a copy of Shantaram or has at some point, and similarly other books. I just love to share what I love. And finally, bookish fact number 25. On the note of sharing my favorite books with friends and family, this year was the first year where I finally had friends ban me from sending any more books. Although they didn't say anything about sending more books in 2019, so you know who you are, they're coming your way. Thanks again for tuning into Bookhaven. As always, like and subscribe, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. See you next time.